So what a journey we've been on. What a journey we've been on with Postgres. And I was thinking a little bit about the difference between a journey and a trip. And probably the most significant difference, if you really think about it, has to do with time. And I can talk to this with some perspective because this is our 4th year of Postgres Vision. I just finished my 11th year here at EDB, participating in a Postgres journey. But let's contrast it with a trip. And I think the distinction's important, particularly when we start to talk about what's ahead and we talk about the confusion of the database landscape. You know, a trip, if you just break it down, a trip is characterized by relatively short-term plan. I don't think generally in a trip we don't expect things to go particularly wrong. We plan a trip. And usually there's a really exciting thing somewhere in the middle of the trip, like how many of you are planning vacations? Vacation's like a trip. You've planned the flights, you plan the hotels, you get where you're going to go. It's a little bit of headache getting through the airports, and you get to your destination. Maybe some of you are doing a trip here. And then you're doing some things you love. They're fun, they're exciting, they're interesting. And then the trip kind of comes to an end, and you move on. Let's contrast that with a journey. A journey usually has a plan, usually has a notion of where you're going, but an acceptance and an understanding that it changes. And that you kind of know, you almost don't know you're on the journey at some points until you're really far into it. And a journey, unlike a trip, you know that you're trying to get someplace important, and you know that on that journey there are going to be moments of great success, of great joy, and there's going to be moments of difficulty and maybe despair and pain and uncertainty. But in the journey, you also know you're on a path to creating something, to building something, and to achieving something more meaningful and more substantial. And when I think about where we are in the evolution of Postgres, and I think about our evolution here at EDB, I think about it like a journey. And when you endeavor to do really big and really important things, you have to approach them as if you're invested for the long term. You have to accept that, in fact, you're on a journey. And you accept all the things that come along with that. Very different than thinking about what it's like to be on a trip. And so if you look at the history of Postgres, you can see what that journey looks like. The Postgres journey started in 1986 with the work that Mike Stonebreaker did at Berkeley. And I am delighted that Mike has agreed to come here and join us tomorrow. And so I urge all of you that are here, come hear Mike. He's going to talk a little bit about his experience with Postgres from the beginning. And it's really illuminating for those of you who have never heard him talk about that experience. It's really illuminating to understand the perspective of Postgres from the beginning. And really, that was the start of the Postgres journey. And now we'll fast forward and you look through some of the years. Let me jump ahead. The open source Postgres project, that was started now in what year? 1996, so 23 years ago. The open source community project started. We've got some great people here. You'll actually get a chance to hear from one of them, Bruce Momjian, who was one of the founders of that initiative. But the transformation of Postgres from project work that was done at university to an open source initiative that invited many in to contribute. And through the years, there are a lot of things that have changed with Postgres. I'm not going to go through all of the technical achievements. EDB was founded in 2004, so we're now a 15-year-old company. And I can speak to the last 11 years of that, the number of times that our customers in the early days would question the endurance and the durability of Enterprise DB, and Postgres for that matter, to meet their growing and evolving needs. And think about it. Now I can say confidently, 11 years later, we've proven that point. We've proven that part of being on a journey is demonstrating that you have endurance, demonstrating that you have durability. And that durability comes in the form of all these technical advancements you see. Some of them more important than others. I'll comment on one that really I find striking. I came to EDB at a time right after. So this was in 2008. And for those of you who remember back to 2008, early in the year 2008, does anyone remember the big deal that happened then? Sun Microsystems bought MySQL AB for $1 billion. Everyone remember that? Who remembers that? It's a long time ago. Ironically, now that's part of Oracle, as you all likely know. And at that time, I remember the market saying, okay, the open source database game kind of over now. It's been, MySQL has declared the winner, and attention is kind of moving on to the next topic. It was after that that I chose to come to EDB because I didn't believe then, and I don't now, that technology actually addressed the large-scale needs that enterprises have. And a great example of that is, MySQL is always easy to use, very developer-friendly. We see some modern technologies that look similarly. Postgres, at that time, had just, availability of Postgres on a Windows server was only a couple of years old at that point in time. And where was the world of developers? Largely on Windows Server. So in some ways, Postgres kind of broke out through that simple act of getting Postgres supported on Windows Server where the developers lived. And there's a whole host of other important technology advancements. But I want to point out that at the end of the day, what defines the journey is who's using the technology. So when I think about enterprise customers, this is a representation of you. And when you look at the companies here, what do you notice? How many of them are their endeavor is on a trip as businesses? Not one, of course. All of these companies exist to create long-term shareholder value, long-term livelihood for their employees. And so I see a remarkable intersection between the journey that we're on with Postgres and the long-term needs of enterprise customers. And I expect that as we go through this journey, we're going to have moments that are very high and moments that are low. I'm going to point out some of both. We're in a moment of high here because, as some of you know, if you follow DB Engine's ranks database popularity, Postgres has been named Database of the Year in 2018, actually Database of the Year for 2 years running. By the way, that's in the sea of a lot of other new technologies, new database technologies that have had their moment, their trip moment. Look at another piece of data. I know most of you would be familiar with the Stack Overflow developer survey. I think over 90,000 developers are surveyed. And of databases, most loved databases, Postgres is number 2. Is that news to you guys? Big shock, not to this audience? Pretty remarkable. And that's been consistent year over year. Here's some of the other interesting changes. This really speaks to the nature, the long-term nature of this category. In 2015, there were 17 more companies on Gartner's Magic Quadrant for operational database management systems than there were in the last one published at the end of 2018. Think about that change. It's like more than half of the companies. And you can look at some of the names. We won't highlight them. Really important specialty technologies, taking their turn at the plate, purpose-built to solve a specific need. And who can remember looking back in time to 2015, the discussion, who remembers the NoSQL discussion in 2015? Everyone was saying, right, the doom of the SQL relational database. No one will ever use it again. Do you guys remember that? The heat and light around that trip was shocking. And what does it mean? What did it mean for us? If you looked at it through the lens of Postgres and a commercial enterprise like EDB supporting Postgres, it looked intimidating. It looked scary. We talk to ourselves all the time, like, how come Postgres isn't more prominent? How come Postgres doesn't get the credibility it deserves? But guess what? The market responded. The market knew the truth. You know the truth. The truth is, there are really important specialty technologies out there, but they're specialty technologies. 38 represents the consecutive quarters of EDB's subscription revenue growth. 38 consecutive quarters. And I reflect on Sir Tim's comment about when was the big bang in the World Wide Web? It was, and I think you described it as a continuous explosion. There's not a moment, there's not a singular moment here, like we've seen with so many of the other new specialty technologies. But you, as developers, as Postgres community contributors, and as users of Postgres have created this trajectory. See, you know the truth. And guess what I can tell you? Because I've been here for every one of those quarters. By the way, if you do the math, I think we're coming up to 10 years. 10 years of successive quarterly growth. By the way, I'll point out that successive quarterly profitable growth. That's a shocking statistic in software. It's even more shocking up against the massive amount of economics and heat and light that we've seen play out with other companies. That 38 consecutive quarters represents 42% year-over-year revenue growth for EDB through May of 2019. And what does it look like? Today, you represent part of that tapestry. 102 Fortune 500 companies now use EDB Postgres to solve really critical business requirements and needs. 337 of the Global 2000 are using Postgres from EDB to help build their businesses. And we count over 4,000 total customers who are using the technology. So when you step back and think about, are we on a trip or are we on a journey? All the data and evidence suggests we're on a journey. Part of that journey is defined by how you decide to come to Postgres. And we're seeing that in really interesting new ways. I think there was a time, and if you know EDB, our history being rooted in some work we did with compatibility for Oracle, our history was focused much more on migration, as you guys likely know. But more and more what's interesting is we've participated as a proper technology choice in digital transformation. More and more, we see new customers coming in, developing new applications on Postgres, which is really gratifying. One of the things we'll talk about going forward is how we're going to continue to make it easier for developers to take advantage of Postgres. But as it relates to migrations, last year at Postgres Vision, we launched our migration portal. Some of you have had a chance. How many of you had a chance to look at the migration portal or use the migration portal? Okay, you should try it out. We, in the past, not quite a full year, about 1.7 million Oracle DDL constructs have been analyzed through the migration portal. When we first did the migration portal, we had about a 25% success rate of migrations that required no manual intervention. As of June 2019, we're at 80% successful migrations that require no manual intervention. Remarkable number. A big part of Postgres adoption continues to rely on migrations. Interestingly, in the past 3 years, we've seen 5.6 million downloads of Postgres from edb.com. 5.6, and that averages out to, what does that average out to? How much? 6,000 a day. 6,000, and that's just from edb.com. So when you're wondering what's happening in the world of Postgres, a lot's happening. So this is our moment to shine. 4.6 billion. That represents the loss in market cap from the high point to today for the Hadoop, the publicly traded Hadoop vendors, formerly many, now one. That's the loss in market cap. From the high to today, $4.6 billion. What happened? Where are they on the journey? And all along, a couple of years ago, Matt Acey, I don't know who follows Matt, made a kind of an interesting tweet. He said, Postgres keeps having a moment, like for the past 5 years. Add 2 years to that, 7 years, and you get a sense. This is the survey on the bottom, is the DB Engine survey that shows the popularity of Postgres. So we deal with on the journey, what's pressure feel like on the journey? Pressure feels like there's a lot of competing interest. There's a lot of competing heat and light around technology. And EDB is a relatively small company. We have a great community. I don't think that this community is particularly noted for overzealous promotion of the tech. We'd much rather do it right, stay the course, make great tech. Fair to say, Bruce? And so I'd urge you to separate facts from feelings. I use this expression at home all the time, but very unsuccessfully. I would say it's like kind of crash and burn. But here, think about it. I think enterprises are getting distracted. I think it's easy to get distracted when you think about not the millions, but literally the hundreds of millions of dollars that it spent by large, good specialty technology companies, particularly in the NoSQL world, to tell you that the only thing you're ever going to need is this new specialty technology. And that's not just supported by dollars. It's the army of humans. What makes all these companies massively unprofitable, by the way, unlike EDB, is they spend massive amounts of money, not only in the promotion machine, but the sales machine, to overwhelm you with human touch, to convince you that the fact is you need these technologies more than you need, true general purpose database, open source database like Postgres. And so I urge you to separate the facts from the feelings. We're going to show you some benchmark work, interesting benchmark work we just did. We haven't announced it yet. It's going to be announced tomorrow. We sponsored a series of benchmarks that looked at Postgres, in this particular case, compared to Mongo, across a wide range of workloads, OLTP, OLAP workloads, and we found that Mongo was 4 to 14 times slower than Postgres across diverse workloads. It wasn't a curated test. We did a proper bench test, and you'll see the results of that. So there's facts that support, even with Postgres, you can do many of the things, particularly in the world of document database, that you think there's only one answer for. And we're going to continue to show you that's not true. So I urge you to take a step back and ask yourself, can you separate the facts from the feelings? And it's hard to do. It's hard for all of us to do. Here's the reality, though. I'm going to give you a few facts. So Postgres, in fact, is everywhere. And I suppose that's not new, so let me put a face on it the best I can. Look at top technologies that are running on Docker today. Here, I'll make it a little easier to see. Postgres, third most used technology running on Docker. Maybe that's a surprise to you, maybe not. I think it speaks volumes. One, I think it's a really important indicator as we see the proliferation of container technology and enterprise solutions. I think equally important, obviously, that Postgres is there. But if you just dialed that clock back 5 years ago, it didn't look quite like that. 5 years ago, it looked like this. This is Datadog's container survey. So pretty remarkable shift in 5 years. Postgres is changing the technology landscape in important ways. We see Postgres everywhere around the world. I got a chance last night. We have some colleagues here from the Asia market. I think we have a cohort of 20 to 30 that came from Japan, China, Korea. and Taiwan. Thank you. And if I left you off, I apologize. Here's a representation of EDB's business. Remember that chart I showed you of 38 consecutive quarters? Our business divides globally. 51% of EDB's business comes from the North America market, predominantly the United States. 29% of our business comes from the Asia market, and 20% from the European market. If I include some of the work we do with the U.S. Department of Navy, there's some boats that float around between all those regions that use all their data management technologies running on EDB Postgres. I don't know where we'd put them. That number moves depending on where the boats are. That was funnier than that. We're also in every industry. Postgres is now embraced, if you look across that, 30% in information technology businesses. That's the breakdown of EDB's business by SIC code. 27% is in the financial services, and that's a full range, everything from trade houses to commercial banks to retail banks to insurance companies. 24% is in government, and that spans a wide range of government. A heavy use here in the United States in the Department of Defense. Also broad use in civilian agencies, both here and internationally, and more we're seeing state and local and education facilities using Postgres. And then media and telecom, which includes telecommunications companies, it also includes cable companies, about 9%. Doesn't add up to 100, there's 10% that would be in the bucket of other. Every single industry is taking advantage of Postgres on their journey to create transformation. And we're used across virtually every meaningful workload in enterprise. So this represents a model, the way we think about the use of Postgres in enterprise customers. And there are really three sections. We talk about it, and it helps inform how we think about product roadmap. So we like to group into systems of record, which you would think about, the classic ERP system where there has to be one single source of truth. Very transactionally oriented. Then we also have systems of analysis, like you would expect. Those include, a variety of analytic type workloads, data warehouse, data lakes, reporting applications, and the like. And then systems of engagement, where, we have a database that supports a web interface of some sort, and a database-backed website. So if you look across that landscape, EDB's business is represented in every area. 53% of our customers, and this adds up to more than 100% because our customers use us across multiple different workload types. 53% of our customers report that they use us in systems of record. Not surprising. Interestingly, from my point of view, 63% report that they use us in systems of analysis. And then 17% report that they use us in systems of engagement. And I'll note something, we call out the corners of this. We see this market as a $40 billion market. The vast majority of that money today is still spent, and I expect will continue to be spent on open source, on traditional relational databases, but in particular, open source, true general purpose databases. And those corners really represent, that all those companies that came off the Gartner Magic Quadrant, most of them live in these corners. Some of the companies, by the way, that are on the Magic Quadrant live in these corners. And as you think about those companies and those technologies, I encourage you to think about how you use them. And remember, be clear, keep the facts from the feelings. So why are we here? A vibrant community. I think this is one of the finest open source technology communities in the world. It's an independent community. There are 5 core team members that govern the project. 2 of them work here at EDB. There are 30 major contributors who really drive technology leadership in the community. A handful of those also work here at EDB. There are hundreds of other important contributors to the project spread around the world that developed over 400, almost 400,000 lines of code contributed in 2018 in over 2,100 commits. So a very active project. And I encourage you to come and hear Bruce later today, 4:15 today, talk about the democratization of databases. Great talk. I urge you to see him. And Postgres success has bred success in a network, and I'm delighted and very grateful to thank our sponsors for joining us on this journey and being here to represent their companies and the work they do in and around Postgres. So we've got them set up out here. They've got great people here, and I urge you to spend some time and learn more about what they do. So we're on the journey, and the future is Postgres, and we're going to help you get there. We've been working with enterprise customers now over a long period of time. Some of our biggest customers, particularly in the financial services industry, have been sequentially graduating the use of EDB Postgres to higher and higher levels of mission-critical workloads. And we're kind of coming into that arena where we're now fully deployed into the tier 1, true mission-critical, large-scale enterprise applications. And our goal is to help get all of you there. And we're working across many technology areas, from performance and scalability to pluggable storage, heavy emphasis on replication and on our replication server, and of course, continued investment in cloud and containers. So I urge you to come on performance and scalability, some great talks. You're going to hear Robert's going to talk. Robert Haas is going to talk about what's ahead in Postgres 12. I think Ken's going to give you a sense of the roadmap. And then Dave Page, who's here, is going to talk a little bit about how you manage Postgres at scale with Ken, with PEM. And then Tom Kincaid and Andrew Dunson are going to talk about vacuuming in Postgres. For pluggable storage, Andres Freund is here. He's going to talk about the new developments in pluggable storage. You should see that. Replication, our own Zahid Iqbal is here. He's going to talk about where we're going with that. And then containers in the cloud, there's a whole host of things. Oscar Herrera is going to talk about some of the advanced patterns in Kubernetes. Kanchan Moedi is going to talk about how you can build an on-demand Oracle-compatible Postgres database in minutes. And we have a variety of really important speakers here, so I urge you to kind of get around and see these talks. All of them speak to how we're getting Postgres on this journey to the next level. Migrations are still a central part of what get people onto Postgres. And we'll have a variety of discussions, but the fact is companies continue to leave Oracle and want to do so at an accelerating rate, and their preferred database in that transformation is Postgres. And in that journey, they turn to EDB. Craig Guarenti is here from Palisade Compliance. He's going to talk a little bit about the contractual side of getting you off of Oracle. As a former Oracle, one of the guys at Oracle who ran the legal department and helped build some of those agreements. He'll help you understand how to deal with that. It was a long time ago. We love him now. And at the end, this journey is about a bigger network. And that network is you. So I urge you to take the opportunity to talk to each other, to learn from each other, to understand what your colleagues have done on this continuum of acceleration and acceptance of Postgres. You know, we talk about where the future is. Every journey, the journey doesn't end, and that's what I love about this endeavor and why I'm so proud to have been leading EDB for 11 years, and I hope I'm doing it for the next 11 years, because in order for this journey to take shape, it requires the right people, the right technology, and the right business. The future, I think, will continue to show that Postgres is in the lead. And I think for the first time, really in the evolution of Postgres, that future is taking shape now. Thank you.